WBNE.
Hello and welcome to episode 176, all about the Silmarillion, Akallabeth, being the 176th part of That's What I'm Tolkien About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. I've been experiencing the world of J.R.R. Tolkien for the first time, and right now I am reading the Silmarillion, so you don't have to. Today I'm joined once again by FantasyAnnexe on TikTok. Welcome back, Annex!
Hey, thanks for having me back to talk about this incredible chapter.
I know, it is pretty incredible when you're reading it and you're like, how did this all happen? There's a lot, I think there's a lot of things they could have done to avoid this end.
Yeah. But things were slowly set in motion and it was inevitable by the end.
Yes, yeah. I will try so hard to not bring up Rings of Power throughout our conversation, because this is about, this episode is about the Silmarillion and about Akallabeth, but I am very interested to see what the show is going to do with Numenor if they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion. Unless they have like specific rights to just the Akallabeth and of the Third Age and the Rings of Power. But from what I hear, they don't have any of those rights. So I'm interested to see how they're going to, it would be really cool to see all of this play out in the series. But I don't know how they're going to do that if they don't have the rights.
No, and we know that they've made a bunch of changes already. Some of the characters in the second half of the Akallabeth aren't in the show, so it's going to be an interesting mishmash of stuff.
Yes. Yeah, an interesting mishmash, I think, is a great way to sum it up. Do you have, just real quick, do you have, a few thoughts that you want to share about Rings of Power, since I didn't have you on during that time, so if there's something you wanted to share, be like, I hated it, or I loved it, or I was in between.
I preferred the second half more than the first half. Well, I preferred like episodes 6 and 8, I think were incredible. Episode 4 was pretty great. I liked the ending, it seemed, a lot more than some people seem to. But I really, really liked how the show wrapped up. And I think part of that was that I got a very interesting experience that most people didn't get, which is that I saw episode 8 in a theater with an audience.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So Empire was doing a screening as part of their podcast, and I got to see it with a group of nerds. And I think what that showed me is that this is a show that absolutely should be seen as part of with a community, because it really changes the experience. But yeah, so I loved episode 8, and I think 6 was obviously great. Yeah, I liked the show. I think there's a lot that could be improved, but overall I thought it was a pretty good show. Yeah, excited for season 2.
Yeah, very cool. That's so awesome that you got to see a screening of it with other people, because I think you're very right that if I had not been, the most enjoyable part of the first season for me was like getting to talk and speculate with people in between each episode and freak out over certain moments with each other and see other people's reactions. That's definitely like I think the best part.
For sure.
So that's so cool that they did a screening. I hope that they'll like offer to do, I hope more people will be able to attend more of those in the future. I don't know. That would be really cool to do.
Hopefully, yeah. It was really nice, because we saw that episode and then afterwards there was about 100 of us maybe. And then we all left the reception area and we were all talking about the episodes, going back in and talking about it. And then people like split off in groups. I was with a couple friends and then a couple random strangers, and we, went off to get some drinks and talk about the episode. And so it was just a very great communal experience. And that's definitely what was more fun about the season, like having those discussions on Twitter and stuff. Yeah, it's a lot more fun in person.
Yeah, I was thinking today I was like, oh, it might be nice for me one day to do an episode where I just have people share like, what does Tolkien mean to you? And I was thinking about like what it means to me, and it means community. And I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense, because that's kind of at the root of what Tolkien wrote in Lord of the Rings, is like the fellowship and like supporting each other, and like you can't do this alone. Like Frodo needed his Sam to do this, and so like that's what makes all of this so wonderful, is that like you can't I mean, you can watch and read all of this alone, but I think it definitely heightens the experience when you get to enjoy it with other people. Or in my case, when I'm reading the Silmarillion and I am just saying, I don't know what's going on, I hate this book. I just want it to be done. And then other people come on and defend it. So so that being said, yeah, let's jump into and finish up the Akallabeth. Spoiler alert, but also not spoiler alert, the downfall of Numenor.
Yeah.
Where we last, previously on Akallabeth, Pharazon had just stolen the throne, essentially, from Miriel, forced her hand in marriage, and changed her name. So, off to a great start. Then he becomes, obviously, I think we can imagine this, that he becomes very power hungry, very determined to like do things his own way. Where is it? I think at some point it says that like he decided without the counsel of the Valar and without the counsel of anyone else.
Yeah.
And that like just kind of made me laugh that he's doing all this on his own and not even talking to like advisors, or he's like, no, I know what I'm doing.
No, but it also makes a point that he's doing stuff on his own, but he is the strongest king of Numenor there has been, really, since the first one. Right? It makes the point that he's the mightiest and proudest of all kings. He's proud, but he's also strong. So he's doing stuff on his own, but he's kind of justified in that he's the strongest and he knows it.
Yeah, there's no stopping someone who's in a position of power and they know that like they're the best at it so far, that they're like, oh, I'm the best Numenor's ever seen. Yeah. And worth mentioning, if you're wondering, like, how far along are we into Numenor's history at this point, Pharazon is now I think he's the 25th king, and keeping in mind that their kings have lived anywhere from 200 to 500 years, it's been a while. So it's not like, oh, this is a brand new, city or kingdom that just was founded. Like they've been around for a while now.
I think it's been
obviously nothing compared to the elves.
no, I think it's been well over 3,000 years at this point, probably, because I think the second age lasts for like 3,500 years. And this is towards the end of that. So this is 3,000 years of Numenor at this point.
Yeah. So theoretically, they should have a lot of they have a lot of history under their belt, a lot of, a pretty solid foundation. So I'm in the camp of like, there's a lot of things that they could have done to avoid what happens, but we'll get into that. Also, so meanwhile, over in Middle Earth, of course, we know Sauron is still there. He's rising in power. And he's like, ready to throw hands, and he's like, let's go. I want to do my thing now. Melkor had his chance, and look how that went.
Yeah.
Pharazon, so this is one of the things that he's like not taking other people's counsel about, I believe. He decides that he's going to defeat evil and Sauron, essentially. And he goes over to Middle Earth and basically like plops down his throne on a hill and is like, well, I'm the king now.
He tends to do that a lot.
Everyone come worship me.
Yeah. He does it a few times in the second half of just shows up at a place and goes, this is my place now. Everyone else bow before me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he commands, calls for Sauron to come and swear his fealty to him. And Sauron does come to him. And he swears his fealty and, bows down, worships him, whatever, because he is now aware that, oh, the Númenóreans, they have they've spent, like you said, 3,000 years building up their crafts, their weapons. Pharazon, especially under his reign, has been building up an armory. So they're a pretty big, fleet of mariner soldiers, essentially. And Sauron's like, oh, maybe I can't win right now. So I'll bide my time and eventually I'll win things over.
Mm-hmm. He uses cunning rather than, because he knows he can't win with straight power.
Yeah. It's so cool seeing the because we know Sauron is crafty, and it's so cool to see that playing out here.
Mm-hmm. And it also makes me think, seeing how we see Gondor and the kingdoms of the West in Lord of the Rings, and then we see how easily Sauron goes against them. And then if you then imagine how strong Numenor must have been, that Sauron looked at it and was like, I can't defeat these people. Like how strong, how great they must have been. Yeah. And it's very
and also
tragic.
like how and just showing like how far they fell in that same swoop, you know, of like, wow, they were so strong that even Sauron realized he couldn't defeat them.
Yeah.
And then seeing how much they had to lose afterwards. Pretty epic scale. So yeah, Pharazon, he's commanded Sauron to come and swear his fealty to him. And he does that, but Pharazon is like, I don't believe you. So I'm going to take you hostage. And he brings him back to Numenor. And I'm like, dude, why would you do that? That just seems like the worst possible move.
Yes.
I mean, I guess I on one hand, I get it because it's like you want to, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But like, dude, not a good move.
It's interesting how it's described, isn't it? That like Pharazon knows that Sauron is trying to trick him. And so he's like, I will bring you back to my house so that you can't trick me.
Yes.
And then that completely backfires.
It's so, like, obviously, us as the reader, as the outsider, we're like, you guys are so stupid. Can't you see what he's doing to you? Like, it's so obvious to us. But again, that's just, the craftiness of Sauron, that he is able to manipulate everyone to such an extent that all of this happens. They go back to Numenor with Sauron and they keep him, imprisoned, I guess. And for a while, he's a master manipulator, and he is working to get under, he's getting under Pharazon's skin about like, oh, I think you're way more powerful than the Valar. Like, what do they know? Like, you I think you could easily defeat them if you had the help of, I think he says, the Lord of Darkness. And Pharazon is like, who's that? And Sauron's like, let me introduce you to my good friend Melkor.
Have you heard of our Lord and Savior Melkor?
Yes, that's exactly what it feels like.
Yes.
Like Sauron's a Mormon knocking on his door.
Yeah.
Have you heard the good word today? So then Pharazon is introduced to Melkor, and he starts worshiping him in secret, and then slowly it kind of like trickles out from there to where pretty much everyone in Numenor is now I think they don't necessarily know the extent to which like understand the hugeness that was Melkor, because they weren't alive when all of that was happening, and they're just hearing about Melkor through Sauron. So I get the impression that they don't fully understand that they're like worshiping, essentially Satan. They just think that this is their way to gain more power and get a leg up over the Valar, and that this is like the way to the future that they want is through like, oh, the Valar, they did nothing for us. But here's this other guy who's coming around saying, hey, I can help out. Yeah, have you heard about our Lord and Savior, Melkor? And
he also basically tells them that, like, the Valar don't actually have power, and they just made up Eru. Like, Eru doesn't exist. It's Melkor who made the world, and Melkor can make another one if he wants. And you can, I mean, I would have thought that the elves would tell them about Melkor, but it's been like 1,000 years since the elves have left them. So, yeah, the elves, they've forgotten about who they were actually fighting in the previous age.
Yeah, it's definitely something that, like, as when Numenor was first founded, obviously Elros knows exactly who Melkor is, but as these thousands of years of generations are growing up and they're moving further away from the elves, those original stories and firsthand accounts of what they were fighting against kind of peter off, and they're not telling their children anymore, or they're like, oh no, that's just a story crazy grandpa was telling us. I don't know how true it is anymore. And with so much distance from what their founding fathers essentially experienced, it's so easy to be like, I don't think I know, like, I don't think I understand our history anymore. I don't know what's true and what isn't. And here's this guy telling us to try something different because what we've been doing isn't working out the way that we want it to. So let's try something else.
Yeah, this is a really hot guy. He's very charismatic. He's very well spoken.
Yes.
And he's telling us about this new guy we could follow. And the new guy will make us live forever. And it's all great. So why not? Let's just give that a go for a bit. And let's sacrifice some humans.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, he looks a lot like the character Halbrand from Rings of Power. Don't know what that's about.
Yeah, this guy used to be a blacksmith, right? Wasn't he working in the smithy for a bit?
So like complete side note about Rings of Power. I think I've probably ranted for like a full episode's worth just about the whole Halbrand Sauron thing because I was really mad that they decided to do that because I thought it was such an obvious choice that I was like, oh no, it can't be that. It's got to be something else.
No, but I think I was okay with it because I was fully on. I think I guessed that Halbrand is Sauron before the first episode. When we knew that Galadriel meets this random person in the sea, I was like,
see,
that's
what was making me so mad
Sauron.
about it. I was like, people have been guessing it's him since even before the beginning. There's no way it's him. And then it was. And so like now reading this, and again, this is what's so confusing about like what they do and don't have rights to, because when you're reading this and you're reading about like, oh yeah, Sauron was a smith and he went to he is in Numenor and he becomes like their captive, and like reading all of that and then seeing what unfolds in the show, I 100% understand why everyone was so convinced that Halbrand was Sauron, and you ended up being correct.
Yeah.
Again, it makes me so mad.
But it's interesting because it makes a point, right? That when like Sauron first gets taken as a captive to Numenor, he's like blown away by the city. And we already kind of saw that in the show when Halbrand shows up and he's blown away by the city. So like a lot of things that happen after he's taken captive has already happened. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, like all of the little breadcrumb, the breadcrumb trail to leading to Halbrand is Sauron. Those crumbs were there from this source material, even though it is a little bit wonky with like the timeline of things. For example, there is a man named Amandil who is good friends with King Pharazon. And I was like, Amandil, that's an interesting name. Why have I never heard that before? But like, it sounds really familiar. And then it says like, and his son, Elendil. And I was like, oh, that's why.
They cut a generation out.
Yeah. So that's something that like in the show is where like the timeline is getting weird because Elendil he's not friends with Pharazon, but like at this point, like his dad would be alive and would be friends with Pharazon, and you would start seeing this separation between them happening and seeing that play out. But yeah, again, with the way that like they had to do certain things with the timeline in the show, they cut him out. So his friend Amandil, who he like previously, looked to as a confidant, an advisor, someone to help guide him. And Amandil sees this turn in Pharazon, and he's like, this is not what we set out to do here. This is not why Numenor was founded. I think things are going south quickly.
Yeah. I think it's a bit like he had a friend, Pharazon, who used to say some wild things in the past, and he's like, oh, that's just Pharazon. And then he becomes king and actually starts doing that things, and he's like, oh no, okay, I need to step away from this guy. he's crazy. He's crazy.
Oh, we need to take this seriously now. Yeah.
These aren't just words. This dude has power.
Yeah. That's dangerous at this point. Yeah. So he packs up all like his family, Elendil, his grandson Isildur. These names sound very familiar, I hope, everyone. And they go, and also like, I think it's the throwaway other son, Anarion, who is only mentioned in in Rings of Power and is kind of like the obscure brother who like sailed off to try to find the Valar and then he just disappeared. I don't know. We might see more of that later on. Who knows? Yeah, they all get packed up and they go to, with the rest of the quote unquote faithful, the elf friends, they go to Romena, which I clearly was not paying attention earlier because I read this and I was like, I don't know where that is. I'm assuming it's a little island maybe off of Numenor. What is this place?
Romena, I want to say it's not a separate island because Numenor is only one island. There is only one land. I believe Romena is further to the west. I don't remember if it's exactly a city or just the name of the region, but it's further to the west, which is where Amandiel's sort of ancestral homeland is. They were the lords of that region. West, so closer to
I was,
the Valar.
I was did you see me drawing the compass in my head?
Yeah. So west, so yeah. It's Andunie Andunie, I believe, is the region. Romena might be the city. One or the other. Yeah. But it's further west. It's not a separate island. It's on the island, but it's on the island of Numenor, but further west.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. So all of the elf friends leave, and I think this makes a huge impact on what is happening in Numenor and, you know, the main city, whatever, the kingdom, because anyone who could have been there to try and draw Pharazon back or, you know, stop things is now gone. Like, any voice of reason is not there anymore to try and stop them in the, you know, immediate area. So Sauron tells Pharazon to cut down the white tree. And you know this is a big deal because Tolkien loves trees.
You can't cut trees down. Also, Romena is the east. Sorry, I got that mixed the wrong way around.
Oh, okay.
Romena is the eastern port, not the western. So the side that's closer to Middle-earth.
Okay.
Yeah.
That also makes sense considering they have to
sail
go.
that way.
Whatever.
Yeah.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Spoilers for later
I
in
was
the
like,
show.
oh no, that makes sense if these are the group of people that are most loyal to, you know, the elves. It makes sense that they would be on the most western part of the island to try and be as close as possible. So, like, that makes sense too. Anyway, potato.
Yeah, I mean
they're separated from
their homeland
from the
is
majority.
in the west. Their homeland Andunie is in the west, closer to the Valar. But the Romena, the place they go to, where they all escape to, is in the east.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. This was all very confusing because there's no map. The only map in the back of the book is of Beleriand, and we know how I feel about maps. But
oh wait, actually, I could have just looked at the map here. I do have a map in my version.
Yeah, there. I was like, there needs to be a map of like the Sundering Seas, and earlier on, when we were mostly in the beginning of the Silmarillion, when a lot of stuff was happening in Valinor, I desperately needed a map of Valinor because I'm like, I don't know where we are. I'm like, are we north, west, south? I don't know.
Maps of Valinor are very vague, but yeah, Romena is so their homeland is Andunie, which is far to the west. So Menelaus is sort of in the center, slightly off center. Andunie, their region, homeland, very far to the west of the island, the extreme end of the island. Romena is sort of much closer. It's maybe like, if you look at the scale, like 50, 60 miles away from Menelaus. It's sort of just a city 60 miles east. So they basically left the capital, but not too far away.
Okay, yeah. So word travels that the king is he's not like immediately, you know, oh, Sauron said I should cut down the tree, let me go do that. He does like pause for a moment and think about it long enough that word travels that he's considering cutting down this tree. And Isildur goes and sneaks back into the courtyard where the tree is, and he takes a fruit from the tree. And this is where my brain starts connecting dots that were drawn when I was like 3 years ago when I was reading, you know, Fellowship and Return of the King and everything. And then they're talking about this tree in Gondor, and I'm like, what's the deal with this tree? Why is it so important? And everyone was like, oh, well, it has this long history and I'm like, I don't really at this point, you've lost me. Like, this is insane history to have for a tree. But now the dots are finally connecting.
Yeah.
So he steals a fruit. He gets a little bit injured on the way out by some of the guards, and he's like dying, but he goes back to Romena, and they plant the tree, and it like immediately like heals him. And yeah, this tree is very important, and not long after this happens, Pharazon and Sauron cut down the white tree in Numenor, in the capital.
So I want to ask you a question about how you interpret this. Do you think that Pharazon cut down the tree because of what Isildur did, or was Pharazon going to cut it down anyway? What was Isildur did sort of like a push of like, like the faithful are still trying to protect it. In that case, I will cut it down now. Or if Isildur hadn't done that, would Pharazon have never cut the tree down, do you think?
I think either way, I think he would have cut down the tree eventually. Like, I think we've seen so much manipulation from Sauron. Like, remember everyone, he came into Numenor as their captive. And this is just what like blew my mind. I was like, it's not like in Rings of Power where he's in disguise and he's, this really hot guy, mysterious guy who refuses to talk about his past. That like they know this is Sauron. And so when he's like manipulating them, I'm like, how do you, like, you're talking to the devil. How do you let him manipulate you? Anyway, but again, that shows like the power of his craftiness. So I think if he can go from starting as their captive to being like the king's advisor and flipping essentially the entirety of Numenor to worship Melkor, I think he would have eventually convinced Pharazon on his own to cut down the tree. But I do think this, I think Pharazon was on the fence, and then this happened, and he was like, oh, that's right. This tree is so important to the faithful that I'm going to cut it down. Like, this is such an important symbol to them that I don't want to be associated with it anymore. So let's cut it down. Yeah.
So Isildur sort of sped it up a little, made it happen quicker.
Yeah. So good job, Isildur.
He did
not the worst thing he's going to do. So
no, Isildur did some good things before he kept the ring. But before that, he was a good guy. Yeah.
Also, just like going back just a little bit, the reason Pharazon was so hesitant to chop it down is because the king before him had prophesized that when the tree falls or dies or the last petals fall, whatever it was, that would signify the end of Numenor. And Pharazon, for as far as Sauron has taken him away from their original roots and stuff, Pharazon is still like, oh, this is a sign of my power as king. And if we chop this down, then that's going to mean that maybe I'm not going to be in power anymore. So it's not so much that he like revered the tree because it was a gift from the elves. It was to him a sign of, his power. Of course, like they chop down the tree, events follow. So like it ends up all being true anyway, but that probably would have happened regardless of whether or not they chop down that tree.
Yeah. I think that prophecies are interesting because it's not exactly cutting the tree down that makes it happen, because the tree was long gone anyway. It's been fading and dying for years. Yeah. But they're cutting the tree down as a sign that things are going to happen.
Yeah, it's a huge sign. So, then what happens?
They build us a temple for Satan and start sacrificing people.
That's right. Yeah, they just straight up start murdering each other.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, this is really bad now. Yeah, it says, and men took weapons in those days and slew one another for little cause. Because at first it started out as like sacrifice, and then it just devolved from there.
Yeah. I mean, once you take the step to human sacrifice, it's not. Yeah. There's not too many steps from
What's one more
there.
Murder?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then they decide that they're going to go back into Middle Earth, and it says they came no longer as the bringer of gifts, nor even as rulers, but as fierce men of war. So they're just, they've already moved from like, oh, we're coming to Middle Earth to meet the rest of our kin, and we're going to share our knowledge with you so that you can also prosper. And then it went into, hey, actually, we're going to come and take advantage of you and your weaker state and your vulnerabilities, and we're going to take your resources and your land. And then now they're like, we're going to fight.
Yeah.
You want to go?
Full on conquering. And I think later it says the ships that they used to sail to Valinor were rowed by slaves. And so I think you can assume that they came to Middle Earth and just took people and was like, we're going to take you captive and we need labor. And they became full-on evil colonizers at that point.
Yes, yeah. So we've everyone on TikTok makes so many jokes about like the, blank to blank pipeline. It's like the, I don't know, Númenor to Conqueror pipeline right here.
Yes.
However, it mentions, even though Pharazon is the king, it is Sauron who is pulling the strings and is manipulating him, and he is the real power behind the throne. And then he kind of like pushes Pharazon one more step and is like, man, the Valar really suck. Like, they are awful. They're just over there. They have the best of the best, and they're just like okay with you guys suffering. And I don't think you're a good king unless you're going to try and go and step up to them. I think if if you were really a good king, you would take what they have and give it to your kingdom. Pharazon's like, you're right. That sounds good to me.
Yeah. And it's fun. It's cool, isn't it? How Sauron makes him do all of these things and then waits until Pharazon is old. And he's like, as he's about to die, he's like, hey, you want to live forever? Because I see that you're dying. And I know just how to make you live forever. There's this land that's called the Undying Lands. You want to go and take it over, and then you can be undying. Pharazon was like, yeah, legit, of course. Yeah, let's do that.
Meanwhile, the faithful Amandil and Elendil and Isildur, those people, are hearing these rumors of war, and they're like, this is not great. And I think it's a huge sign that they still care enough about, their people, that Amandil is like, I want to try and prevent this. I don't want to see them, because they're like, they're not going to win against the Valar. They're obviously going to get slaughtered. So let me try and save them. I'm going to do what our forefather Elendil. Erendil. Too many names.
There's a lot of E names. There's a lot of Dils in it. Yeah.
I'm gonna pull in Erendil, and I'm gonna try to find Valinor, and I'm gonna plead with the Valar. In case I don't come back, in case something happens, just don't get involved in the war. Just stay out of it, because nothing good is gonna come of it. So he gets on his ship and he goes off, but it mentions that he and the people that he was with, they weren't his slaves that went with him, right? It was just like
him and 3 other friends, basically. Him and 3 of his servants or friends or something. They went. Okay, cool. Were never heard of again.
They're not into slavery. That's good.
No.
Always want to double check that. Anyway, so they sail off, and they are never to be seen from again. And it says, men could not a second time be saved by any such embassy, and for the treason of Numenor, there was no easy absolving. So Tolkien's saying here, the same, like, you're not going to save your butts the same way twice.
Yeah, you can't just keep showing up.
You got to figure it out this time.
That was one trick. It worked once, because Arendelle is so awesome. And he came with, Elwing and the Silmaril. That's going to work once, but not twice.
Yeah. So I've never... I promise this is all connecting. I've never read any of the Narnia books, but I know that in one of the movies, Aslan says to Lucy, like, this, because she goes to find him and is like, can't you like come and save us and help us? And he says, like, the same thing cannot happen twice. And so I wonder if like this was something that Tolkien saw Lewis write and was like, that sounds pretty cool. I think I might do that sometime.
Maybe. Yeah, we know that they were talking about each other's stories a lot, so yeah.
Yeah, just like a little connection that I saw between the two. Yeah, Elendil and Isildur and everyone, they're like, well, they are gone. We have not heard from them or seen from them. Obviously, like, the Valar are not going to come and save us. So they, like, get on their ships and they start heading out to Middle-earth.
No, at this point, they're still on the island.
Okay, they're still there.
But they're just preparing in case something happens. They're just boarding their ship with stuff, and they're just like, in case something happens, we're just ready.
Just in case. Yeah. Just in case. We're still going to keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And then Numenor starts being attacked. They have... it mentions that the weather was usually in their favor depending on what they needed, that when they needed rain for their crops, there was plenty of rain. When they needed sunshine, when they needed nice weather, it was always like whatever they needed. But now climate change is getting them. And so they're having terrible like storms, and then the eagles start coming and they're like shooting them with lightning and thunder, which makes me wonder, I'm like, why couldn't you guys do that at any other point when you guys show up to say? I feel like whenever we see them in like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, they're just big birds, but like here they're full of wrath, and it's really cool, but also like, why can't you do that whenever else you're battling?
I think they say eagles, but eagles are supposed to be like the birds of Manwë. So I think the giant eagles in Lord of the Rings are like big eagles. They can talk. I think these are just like power shaped like eagles. I don't. Okay. It's up to interpretation, but I don't think these are actually eagles, because if they are, eagles shooting lightning and storms from their wings is the coolest imagery.
Yes, it's very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, it mentions that this is a war against the deathless, and I'm like, that's pretty metal. That like even that like Pharazon, you're dumb. This is terrible. You're going to fail. Mm-hmm. But like a war against the deathless. That sounds pretty cool to me.
That is
as
an
a
awesome
spectator.
Name. But also, it's in the name that you can't win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's so it's entertaining for us to read, because it's like, well, at least I'm not gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
So Numenor is being attacked relentlessly. Then they are like, fine, we're gonna come to you, and they get on their fleets and they start moving towards into the west. I think only like one boat makes it or to the land or a land, and they step off, because it mentions that like only a few of the Númenóreans like set foot on Valinor, and that's like the last straw for Manwë and everyone. Yeah, Manwë sees the Númenóreans coming for him. One of them has made it onto the land already, and he's like, well, goodbye. This is the last time you'll ever see us.
Yeah.
And he calls upon Ilúvatar, and it says, Ilúvatar showed forth his power and changed the fashion of the world. And a great chasm opened in the sea between Numenor and the Deathless Lands. Again, the Deathless Lands. So, like, they could not win here.
No,
The waters flowed down into it, and the noise and smoke of the cataracts went up to the heaven, and the world was shaken. And all the fleets of the Númenóreans were drawn down into the abyss, and they were drowned and swallowed up forever. It mentions that, King Pharazon and the warriors that set foot on the land of Aman, they lie imprisoned in the caves of the Forgotten. That's intense stuff right there.
I sometimes forget that, Pharazon isn't really dead. I don't know. It's implied that he might not be dead. He's just imprisoned forever in that thing until the world ends.
Yeah. I think it's kind of, I interpret it as like a thing where like he's in purgatory, like his soul probably. Like maybe his body is probably crushed and is no more, but he probably is in a state of purgatory and being trapped. Yeah, until the last battle and the Day of Doom. Yeah.
I pictured it. If you've seen Doctor Who,
I have not, but go ahead, because I'm sure many of the listeners have.
There's in David Tennant's era, there's a 2-part episode called Family of Blood, where it's about this family of this like weird aliens who are seeking mortality, and they kill a bunch of people to try and gain it. And in the end, the Doctor punishes them. It's one of the moments where the Doctor is at his darkest, and he punishes them by giving them immortality, but not in the way they want it. Like he throws the father into the center of like a dying neutron star and makes him live forever. And he like traps the daughter in like a mirror, so she lives forever there. So it's like giving them immortality. So I almost picture it as like very dark, but like giving Pharazon immortality, but not in the way that he wanted. It's like, you'll be immortal and you'll be trapped here forever. And it's very, very dark.
I love that. That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, not cool for Pharazon, but that's cool.
It's a really cool
like,
imagery.
You wanted to live forever? You didn't want to die ever? Okay, we'll give that to you. You're trapped in the caves of the forgotten. No one's going to remember you. This is when Middle-earth essentially becomes what we see it as in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, where Valinor is not on the same plane of existence that, Gondor and the Shire and everything are. And this is like where a lot of my confusion came from, where Beleriand, I was like, wait a minute, so is Beleriand like where the Shire is? And so the destruction and everything, the consequences of ripping Valinor essentially off of this plane, and I say plane because at this point it is flat, the consequences of that ripple over. Numenor is pulled down under the sea. Everyone there is drowned and destroyed. The waters wash over Beleriand and make the ocean come up to the point on the shore that we see like Frodo go to and Bilbo at the end of Return of the King.
So there is a couple things I think I should clarify that.
Oh, I got all that wrong.
so the Valinor thing is true. So it used to be flat. Valinor was in the far west of the world, and it was the boundary between the world and the void beyond. So Iluvatar took Valinor off the planet. And then, so Beleriand was already sunken at this point. Beleriand was gone already. Beleriand sank at the end of the First Age, because all of the stories in the First Age happened in Beleriand, and the war against Morgoth destroyed that place already.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah. So Beleriand was gone, and then...
Okay, so forget... Oh, no, you're right. I remember this. The problem is just that I read that 2 months ago. Yeah,
it's fair enough. No.
And then, okay, that's right. Okay, cool. Great. And then in this process also, Middle-earth is now become round. And they're no longer flat earthers.
Yeah. He basically took Valinor off and replaced it with, if we're doing our world equivalent, then he took Valinor off and replaced it with the Americas. Like he put a different continent there. So when it says that the Númenóreans, once they sail west, they just eventually end up in a different continent that's just like theirs, and then they'll eventually come back around.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially
it's like
what
the
happened.
Opposite. No, it's exactly what happened with Christopher Columbus, and how he thought the world was flat and that he was just going to like fall off one side and land on the other.
Yeah. This is one of the moments in the Silmarillion that always hits me. No matter like how terrible Numenor was at the end of its days, sacrificing people and all the violence, like in that bit when he lists like Numenor went down into the sea, and with all its children and its wives and its maidens, its tombs and its riches, its jewels, its webs, its things of painted and carven, its laughter and its mirth and its music and its wisdom and its lore, they vanished forever. Like so many things that just were gone. And it almost makes me nostalgic, because you read the pages before, and it makes me nostalgic for this 3,000-year-old civilization that just finished. And with it, you lost everything.
Yeah. It's real intense, and definitely shows that the Valar and Iluvatar, they're like, we're done messing around. We're done with you. This has been really annoying. Bye. Yeah. Bye forever.
You're not literally turned into Satan worshippers at the end. No, this is it. Yeah. It's over for you.
Except for Elendil and his family and those other faithful people, they are safe, because this is I can't help just thinking about like Tolkien's upbringing and relationship with like religion and everything, because this just reads to me like, you know, like in the Bible, like the apocalypse has happened. What do they call it in the Bible? I don't remember.
The Noah's Ark story. That's what it reminds me of.
That too. But in Revelations, it says that there's going to come a time when like fire and like everything is going to rain down upon the earth, and only the people who are following God and are saved by Jesus are going to be saved and are going to remain safe from all of this. And it reads very much like that to me when this is happening, where it's like, oh, the people who went against the Valar and the people who went against the elves and turned their backs on those beliefs, they all died horrifically with the ending of the world, essentially. But the people who still loved the elves, they were safe. They were okay because they are still followers of God.
There's a lot of religious, it's Tolkien's Catholicism definitely coming through.
Yes. Yeah. They're saved and they, do they end up in Middle-earth? Yes. They go to Middle-earth, obviously, because they have to do things that lead to Aragorn being the king of Gondor eventually, thousands of years later.
I also want to jump back a slight bit.
Yes, please jump in.
It's a very small, it's just a couple sentences, and this is when it comes to Rings of Power, I think the show is doing really well, is the role of Miriel in Numenor. Because the last time we heard about her is that she got forcibly married to Pharazon, and there's nothing else about her until right at the end, when we get told that she desperately tried to climb. Died. Yeah, she tried to climb to the top of Meneltarm to save herself and didn't make it. But the waters overtook her and she died. She died too. It's the last time and it's I think there's really cool artwork of Miriel on her own trying to run up as she sees the waves coming to like run up the mountain and just being drowned. And it's a really poignant imagery. But there's nothing about her in between. About like she gets married, nothing else about her, and then right at the end.
And then she dies.
Yeah, she died.
Because that's the only things that you ever need to hear about women. When do they get married and when do they die? And maybe when do they have babies? Those are the only things that are important. It is it is interesting reading this after Rings of Power, because seeing that like, oh, Miriel had like essentially no role in anything other than like the throne being stolen from her. And then it's great to see that she is much more of a fleshed out character in the series, with a really wonderful actress too. So like that's really. But I was speculating with my previous guest about how they're going to get to this point with Muriel's character in the show, where Pharazon is taking things over. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he kills her in the show. I don't know. Like, I feel like there's a lot of but again, they don't have rights to any of this. So how are they going to do it? But it's just interesting to think about like, oh, well, how are they going to play all of this out in the show if Miriel is a much more active role in Numenor than she was in Akallabeth in the Silmarillion. So how are we going to get to the point where Numenor falls so drastically when Miriel is seemingly very, I think she's a great ruler from what I've seen so far. It seems like she really cares about her people and is like really trying to do things with a level head.
I think
so. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're going to have to take a lot more extra steps, but it could be a sense sort of like, I think while they were away in Middle-earth, I think we'll find out in season 2 that Pharazon's been playing some games in Numenor, consolidating his power, and she comes back with like a third of the army, like 2/3 of the army are dead. Like Sauron is like they're defeated, and she comes back, and Pharazon makes a point of like, she can't lead anymore, she doesn't know what she's doing. And sort of takes over slowly like that, maybe, rather than just an outright marries her and takes over. Because, I think it's a different vibe between them in the show compared to the story.
Yeah. I'd love to see Sauron come back to Numenor, but in a different form. And just, like, try it all over again.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that didn't work the first time. Take 2.
Yeah. Halbrand? Who's Halbrand? Never heard of him.
Yeah, what? Yeah, who's that? I don't know. It does mention that this temple that they had built, it was so high that there was this like legend or rumor that even though Numenor had sunk, that was like a singular little island left over. And so there are some Numenorians left that are like, maybe we can go find it. Like, maybe we can go find and see what was left. But I think that's all it is to them, is just this like story or legend, and that like no one is ever going to be successful trying to find the remains of Numenor, because there are none. They're all gone. Oh, that's right. What's happened? Yeah, so what's happened to Sauron in all of this, guys? He is, like obviously like drowned and killed just like everyone else. But his spirit arose out of the deep and passed as a shadow in a black wind over the seas and came back to Middle-earth, and to Mordor, that was his home. I don't know if this is... So it says, there he took up again his great ring in Barad-dûr. Does it mean... It doesn't mean the ring right here, does it? Or is it just like looking forward?
I think it does, because no, yeah, it definitely does mean his ring, because at this point the ring has been crafted.
Okay. Okay. I guess we'll get to that in the next part.
The next chapter is of the Rings of Power, but this is happening. So the rings get crafted around the middle of the Second Age, around like 1600. This is all happening in like after the year 3000. So the rings have been around for over a century, over a millennia and a half at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's had the rings for a while. He made the rings and then built up Mordor, and then was just basically chilling there for a while, building up his power. But yeah, so, and you can assume that he left his one ring back in Mordor, which is interesting that Sauron left the ring when he came to Numenor, but yeah, he then went back to his ring.
Maybe he knew that like something bad was going to happen in Numenor, and he's like, maybe I'll leave this here. Keep this for safekeeping back home. Yeah.
Maybe leaving the ring is what kept him alive. It kept his spirit alive, so then there was something to go back to, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah.
That's true, too. Yeah.
But you'll find out all about that.
Yes, gonna learn more about that for sure.
Next chapter, of the Rings of Power.
Yeah, and he goes to Mordor, and it just says that he wrought himself a new guise, an image of malice and hatred made visible, and the eye of Sauron the Terrible few could endure. So he is now at this point the eye of Sauron rather than Halbrand.
Yeah. So he, although it's the eye of Sauron, I think Peter Jackson took some.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's very confusing, because I don't think Tolkien literally meant an eye, but that's how we all see it because of Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson turned it into a literal burning eye on a tower. Which I don't think Tolkien intended. I think he was just like, his gaze is so strong that it was like the burning eye of Sauron. But it wasn't a literal eye. But you know what? It's a popular imagery at this point, and it worked.
I know, yeah. You just can't get it out of your head. All that happened, bummer. It mentions that like from now on they don't necessarily talk about Numenor. They don't use that word anymore to describe it. They use whenever they speak about it, they speak of Akallabeth the Downfallen, Atalante. That sounded so American. Oh my gosh. Atalante, in the Eldarin tongue. Okay, yeah. So when they tell this story, they talk about it in terms of like this great tragedy, kind of like how when we talk about the Titanic, we talk about it could have been when the Titanic first like set out, it was like, oh, this is the biggest ship, it's so cool, it's doing things ships have never done before. Could have been a really triumphant story, but now when people bring up the Titanic, it's only in reference to this terrible tragedy. And then it describes how like, oh, the world is round now, and honestly, this is just a long string of paragraphs that for some reason in my text is in a smaller font.
Yeah.
I guess like it's a story within a story.
Yeah, it's like an epilogue sort of situation. It's like, and then this is the rest of it. I know the audience can't see this, but I just want to show you in the copy I have in the new illustrated edition.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the fancy schmancy one that just came out. Yeah.
It's got this. It's a Númenorian carpet that Tolkien designed. This is Tolkien's own drawing.
I was going to say, it looks like a tapestry or a rug or something. That's so cool.
This is another one.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
That's
just,
so
it's like,
cool.
when I read the words of like, and their art and things woven and like crafted that were lost, I'm just like, this is what was lost.
Yeah.
It was spectacular.
All
And
that
it's
was
all gone.
lost.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. However, sometimes I'm like, Tolkien, did you have any other hobbies?
Basically, no, for 50 years.
He's like, no, I have to draw this rug that this destroyed kingdom would have created.
He had a whole job at like Oxford as a professor, but he's just like, no, I'm going to draw some carpets.
Yeah, he's like, this is more fun for me.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about with the Akallabeth, or anything that I might have missed, or something worth mentioning?
No, I think we hit the big points. It's for me what strikes me a lot about the Akallabeth is, one, the tragedy of it. After, by the end, it was inevitable. It was going to happen. Like once Pharazon took power, things were gone. But at the beginning, like, it wasn't inevitable. It was just like a slow step of like king after king making things worse and worse and worse. So the tragedy of it, and also just like at the end, even though it is terrible what happens, like the imagery is so cool. Like the imagery of 1,000 Numenorian ships sailing to Valinor, and like eagles arrayed upon eagles, and like as far as the eye could see, eagles in the sky, casting down thunder and lightning. Like that imagery is incredible.
Yeah. I like reading this. I was like, oh man, I can't wait to see this in Rings of Power, but I don't know if they can. So I guess we'll have to see like what they have rights to in the coming years.
Yeah.
I think if the Tolkien estate was smart, that they would just give them rights to this so that they can play it out, exactly how the destruction and the downfall, the last battle plays out, because it's so it's of biblical proportions, because the Silmarillion essentially is Tolkien's Middle-earth Bible. So it would be really cool to get to see someone produce this in a cinematic scale, because I think it would make for just like so cool, like anything like on a Avengers Endgame kind of a level of cinema. Yeah,
it's epic television. But I think that one scene of like the wave coming over Numenor, when Miriel had that vision, I saw that, I was like, okay, so there's potential here. So the ending is like that, but with more eagles. It's darker and bigger.
Probably much worse. Yeah.
I want this, but worse. Like, make it bigger and even more epic.
Yes, we see, like, I'm just seeing, like, this rift of the earth opening up and all of the ships, like, falling into it, like, so cool, so cool. Yeah, next week, again, I decided that I'm going to split that section into 2 parts. So next week, listeners will read and talk about the first half of the Third Age and the Rings of Power, and then we will finish out the Silmarillion, I think the week of Thanksgiving for the Americans out there. And then after that, I don't know. We'll have to see. But
Unfinished Tales?
I'm so close to finishing this, and
it's an achievement.
I cannot wait.
I do congratulate you. It is an achievement, finishing the Silmarillion and like going through it properly rather than just like reading it for the sake of reading it, but like reading it properly. It is an achievement.
I'm flattered that you say that I'm reading it properly, because there's a lot of times where I'm like, I don't know what I'm reading. Let me just keep going.
Yeah, that's the effort. It's definitely in a couple of years, if you feel up to it, go through it, read it again with the knowledge with like vague idea of what's happening, and then you'll pick up even more. That's true.
Yeah. I'll be smarter than. Or I'll have forgotten everything and I'll just be starting out at square one all over. Well, Annexe, thank you so much for joining me and coming back on. Where can people find you on the internet?
I am on TikTok as at FantasyAnnexe, which is my display name, or just like my username is at Annexe Wilson, ANEX and Wilson. Mainly. And Twitter, if it's still existing in like a week, I'm on there as well.
I know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's mainly those places.
Yeah, Twitter existing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've been contemplating. I'm like, should I not be on this platform anymore? So I
I'm
guess
just enjoying
we'll see
it.
what happens.
I'm just enjoying his downfall. Whatever is going to happen, I'm just enjoying watching it happening.
It's kind of like we're the faithful, and we're watching the downfall of Numenor. Except except Elon Musk is Pharazon.
Yes, that is actually a very good analogy for this.
Oh my gosh. That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WBNE. If you want to learn more about the network, you can go to WBNE.org. The cover art is by Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at Vaishon Designs. You can get merch for That's What I'm Talking About by going to tpublic.com/user/talkingaboutpod. You can find the podcast on social media at TolkienAboutPod, and you can find me on Twitter and TikTok at MCWattsUp, and on Instagram at MCTurnedDownForWhat. You can support the podcast by becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod to explore the different tiers and perks that are available. I'll be sending out a little surprise, and I literally mean a little surprise. It's not anything to, what do they say? It's not anything to write home about. That's the phrasing. Anyway, I'll be doing a little something for all of my wonderful patrons in the month of December for the holidays and the end of the year to celebrate all of that. So that's coming up. If you want to be a part of that, become a patron. You can join at any level tier. All of it means so much to me. Or if you want to join a specific level, you can join the sponsor tier like Alan. Alan, thank you so much for your support of the podcast. You've been a supporter for a while now, and that does not go unnoticed by me. And I thank you so much. That really is wonderful of you. And by the way, if any of those links or social media handles sounded mixed up to you, or I slurred them, or you just had no idea what I was saying, all of that is always linked in the episode description if you're ever confused about where to find the Instagram page or where to follow me on TikTok. Actually, I think I need to link my TikTok in the episode description, so I will do that. If you want to get artwork done by Vaishon, his stuff is linked in the episode description. So if you're ever confused about what did she say, go check the episode description. It's a pretty cool place to peruse. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
Thanks for having me on, and enjoy the next chapter of The Rings of Power, which is basically a story that we know, told in like 30 pages, because you'll find out how the story of Lord of the Rings is actually the smallest part of the history of Middle-earth and the least relevant
Isn't
part.
that crazy? That blows my mind constantly.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about.